Today we find ourselves directly in the middle iteration of our favorite triannual event of playing as many demos of upcoming Steam games as we can before our fingers fall off and our eyes roll into the back of our head. That's right, it's once again time for the Steam Next Fest, June edition. Let's start out with the best way to relax in the world of video games, doing a menial job that most people hate with Leaf Blower Company. Dive into the role of a person knee-deep in the leafy yard of their home, armed with the might and power of a handheld wind machine ready to get real gusty with your lawn. You'll quickly learn how to blow that floaty fall foliage into garbage bins that will automatically pack it into neat little bags you can scoop up and toss into a repository for a quick payout of both cash and immediate satisfaction. And if those leaves aren't quite cooperating with the terrain, you'll also unlock a leaf vacuum to suck up those plant pieces and deliver an even more rewarding result. And if that's not hot enough for you, you'll also unlock a weed burner to cook any plants or leaves you don't want watching you suck and blow around every corner of people's homes or at this children's playground. But if you want to clean up a bit of a different organic mess, then you'll want to check out Ambrosia Sky. Here you'll take on the task of invading space stations infected with a wide variety of fungus aggressively growing out of every crevice and killing off inhabitants with deadly mushrooms coming out of all of their orifices. But armed with your Super Soaker Fungus Croaker, you can blast back the advancement while isolating and harvesting the delicious fungal fruit that grows upon it. But you'll have to be careful of electrified tendrils, deadly airborne spores, and weird little afflicted alien creatures trying to make you their next mildewed murder victim. But with a grappling hook and some fun gravity manipulation, you'll be collecting weird sci-fi MacGuffins and racing back to the exit ready for the next space adventure and mold remediation. However, you may want your space adventures a little more team-oriented and somehow more violent, so you'll need to try out Jump Ship. After a short intro about how you face-planted onto an alien world during the inevitable human war with AI, you'll soon discover a different AI that you'll befriend and carry back to your base for a Portal-style sentient guide to victory in this war. She'll send you on missions through the most densely packed parts of space to engage in guerrilla warfare against those robotic bad guys and collect all of their garbage to power up your ship, which you'll of course be doing manually by running and flying around crafting parts, ammo, shields, and guns to better explode your enemies both in the space sky and on the surface of various pieces of space debris. And if you had other people playing with you, they'd take the place of your robotic companion to man turrets and help you carry all of this crap without having to make 5 trips. But sometimes you don't want to drag your friends into the freezing vacuum of space, so instead you can take them into the crushing depths of a sunken kingdom of mechanized monsters with Abyssus. After equipping your character with an old-timey diving suit and a customized weapon, you'll literally dive into the depths of caves and ancient temples to liberate the mechanical denizens from their seemingly mortal forms one room at a time. Upon doing so, you'll collect treasure and power-ups to make your guns and abilities even better at blowing things up and tearing them down, which you'll need to do in order to take down the ever-growing monstrosities and bosses that you'll face off against as you dive deeper into each new maze-like level of this subterranean seascape. Yet you might want your subterranean seascape a little more pirate-oriented, and in Davy X Jones, you'll take on the role of Davy Jones and work hand in tentacle with Davy Jones. In a very strange introduction, you'll fight your way through some almost human-looking pirates to get to Blackbeard for whatever reason it is you want to kill him. However, instead of succeeding immediately and making this game pointless, you're captured, keel-hauled, and your kappa is detated from your head, leaving you in this mystical undersea afterlife. But once your headless body is reunited with your headful head, you can fight your way to the exit of this pirate purgatory with your squiggly sword and pistol, and presumably in the full game take the swashbuckling fight back to Blackbeard for revenge. Revenge isn't always the easiest thing to achieve though, and in Void/Breaker you'll be sharing your revenge on a sentient robot torturing you with violent tests with the skeletonized form of your predecessor. Here you'll once again be traveling between designated areas of brutal combat, but this time it's against digital enemy creatures that swarm after you with ill intent. Yet you'll have plenty of firepower to dismiss them with weapons that can be heavily modified to fire faster, hit harder, create special effects, and even change their functionality entirely to either perfectly suit or completely fuck up your approach to this fast-paced combat. Much like Doom Eternal, you'll need to get creative with your kills to stay alive, like stunning your enemies by exploding debris on top of them so their corpses become a piñata of ammo and health. But you'll also need to figure out how to collect those resources while dodging a deadly barrage of exploding spider monsters and projectiles so you don't immediately die a few minutes into every run. But if you want a life or death experience that's a little more calculated and lets you experience the sadistic violence at your own pace, then you'll want to try out Cloverpit. In a game that's supposed to be evocative of Balatro, you'll take on a seemingly simplistic task of gambling, but this time with a slot machine. But you aren't just gambling with your money, because if you're unable to earn and pay enough of your debt, you'll take a quick dip down this trap door into what I assume is a large meat grinder. However, with every payment, you'll have to pay more with each round, and you can only accomplish this by collecting a variety of tools in the form of lovely knickknacks to modify your luck and payouts from the machine. And if you play the odds just right and pay off your debts in time, not only will you survive this demo, but unlock a bonus that you'll be able to use in the full game when it releases. Yet not every pit is quite as pleasant as Cloverpit, and in Ball X Pit you'll be thrust into the chaos of a giant crater filled, for some reason, with a long-ass hallway full of zombie monsters. But those monsters are only a mild threat when you have a variety of bouncy balls to fling directly into and sometimes all the way through their bodies. As you meander down this path, you'll blast away at this randomized pattern of static enemies sitting in weird little boxes until they either disappear or make it to the bottom of the screen where they'll launch themselves at you violently. Some may also fire their own projectiles, joining your ever-growing collection for a chaotic web of flashes and colors, some of which you'll need to grab for efficient fighting and others you'll need to avoid for efficient survival. And at the end of this long road, you'll kick it into reverse to back away from a deadly skeleton zombie king that you'll also need to beat to death with balls. Also, you can collect treasures and resources you'll use to build up your cool elevator city space and unlock more ball-blasting characters. But if you want to build a city space without first needing to kill everyone in your way, then you might be interested in Islanders New Shores. This follow-up to the original game that had you building towns from randomly dealt packs of buildings for points shakes things up by having you build towns from randomly dealt packs of buildings for points. But it's not just a better-looking version of the same game. You also get a wider variety of buildings with unique conditions and limitations for their construction, and you'll even be able to select from 2 slightly different island options when you've successfully earned enough points by placing those buildings in the best possible positions for victory. Yet if you want to achieve victory over buildings as well as a horde of enemies, but much more maliciously, TerraTech Legion is ready to take you there. Here, instead of simply unlocking a bunch of random weapons and abilities that just fling out of your body like a normal Vampire Survivor's bullet heaven, you'll be driving a cool car made out of blocks that you can slap those bad boys onto as you unlock them. You'll also be able to collect more blocks and even wheels to turn your lean, mean shooting machine into a rolling behemoth with guns facing every direction and a constant stream of explosions to deal with the onslaught of increasingly deadly enemies. And if things get too crazy, you can always just run them over for a quick escape. Yet if you're more interested in running over some innocent victims rather than malicious monsters, Speed Demons 2 is the game for you. In this top-down side-racing adventure, you'll take your trailblazing vehicle into a variety of different game modes, all of which have you rampaging down the highway at crazy speeds. You'll take on tasks like ramming vehicles until they explode, passing vehicles without exploding, racing vehicles that sometimes explode, and running away from vehicles all trying to make you explode. But whatever the case, and however things may or may not be exploding, you'll always need to cross the finish line of that arbitrary point on the highway to unlock the next challenge in going fast and kicking ass. But there are other ways to kick ass at high speeds, and one enjoyable way to do that is in the role of some kind of android killing machine in Metal Eden. In this cyberpunk world, you'll be guided by the disembodied voice of a mildly creepy guy that's directing you to a sky elevator that will take you inside of this floating space city to complete a probably nefarious task. On your adventure in wall running and platforming the neo-industrial cityscape, you'll also have to blast apart a whole host of weird monster creatures and robots that are trying to stop you. Except rather than having an arsenal of deadly weapons at your disposal, you'll have to test your efficiency and precision aiming with extremely limited ammo for most of your guns and only one with unlimited bullets that regularly overheats to the point of being just barely more than a piece of shit. But you'll also be able to combine that with your ability to rip some kind of explosive core out of weaker opponents and either chuck it for some explosive damage or power up a super punch, both of which will give you more of that ammo you need to not get your ass kicked. However, getting your ass kicked is a lot more fun when there's some music playing, and in Dead as Disco, every kick you swing and punch you take will be to the beat of a licensed song. This short demo will take you on a journey through the streets and subways, exploring every conceivable way to human pretzel your opponents with a deadly blend of martial arts dance moves and dodging an extremely busy train schedule. Or you can go into the unlimited mode to choreograph your assault in a colorful void of endless brutality. But sometimes all you need is some boops and beeps to satisfy your musical taste, and in Morse, that's what you'll use to engineer the defeat of a flotilla of enemy ships. In what is clearly an effort to maintain the lost language of Morse code, you'll use those classic dots and dashes to spell out the letters of a targeting grid where you'll lob shells at ships cruising down the lane seeking to do evil boat things. But if you can tap that button with the correct amount of fervor and boop duration, you'll be able to cut them down with concentrated fire from a variety of shells that grow with your success, right along with the number of lanes your enemy can take to your base, ensuring no matter how good you become at 19th century communication, you'll always be one mistimed beep away from defeat. Yet you could take advantage of a slightly more modern method of communication and use the power of voice and computers to guide a motley crew of reformed superheroes into successful gig work with Dispatch. Dive into the role of a former mech-driving superhero who had his mech blown up in battle and has to take a job dispatching superheroes from this only slightly atypical office setting where half of the employees are in spandex uniforms. In this Telltale-esque narrative adventure made by some of the same people that made the Telltale games, you'll be selecting dialogue options for interactions and having your Jesse Pinkman voice character speaking it out loud. But unlike every other Telltale game, you actually have gameplay in the form of determining the best superhero for each job, managing their interactions, and even doing some hacking minigames to feel like you're actually participating in something. However, if you want to continue your journey to games that iterate on their defunct predecessors and you're a fan of the Homeworld series, you might want to check out Arrow 1. This game may look like a complex nightmare of 10,000 UI buttons and screen features, and it is, but after like 20 or 30 minutes I finally figured out how to build units, just in time to take part in cool space battles. But in that time I also figured out how to build up my mothership block by block, adding pieces randomly and creating a horrific monstrosity that I ultimately covered in guns for something like an Americanized board cube. And while I ultimately blew up and died horribly, I was able to attach a mildly phallic drill head to the front of my ship and ram it into the enemy stronghold for some surprisingly effective damage before that happened. But if you want your space battles a little more interactive, you should check out Starstrike. This simple 3D game on a 2D plane reminded me of the classic Rebel Galaxy, except here you'll be rampaging through enemies, blasting them to voxelized chunks as pieces are blown off until they're just a random assortment of floating space garbage. And you too can take damage to specific locations on your ship until you end up looking like you've had bad plastic surgery, but luckily your repair kits will grow that right back for you. Then you can continue your adventure in blowing up just about everything that you can encounter in the realm of space. Space doesn't have to be exclusively about violence though, and in Starbirds you can take the friendly approach to space travel where you're just ripping all the resources out of every asteroid you can find. In a joint venture between Kurzgesagt and the developers of the addictive Dorf Romantic, they both step away from their hard-to-pronounce and spell names to create a game with a much simpler title. With the birds of the former and the methodical gameplay of the latter, you'll be using the combined power of science and automation games to get sucked into a world of extracting resources, combining them in a variety of ways, shipping them between locations, and fulfilling dozens of quotas in a way that will coalesce with every fiber of your ADHD. But some people like to focus their mental diversities into unhealthy obsessions with hobbies, and a common one of those is flying drones, so if you're one of those people, you might want to check out Nexus FPV. In what might appear like a familiar 6 Degrees of Freedom flying game actually gives you the control of a gravity-affected quadcopter, but still asks you to blow up everything you can lay your eyes upon. Once you get the hang of the controls and don't immediately nosedive into the ocean, you can venture out onto one of a handful of existing maps to bombard anything on the ground or in the air with a collection of weapons you unlock through the progression. From things like laser guns, missile launchers, machine guns, and even shotguns that launch a rain of fire on the helpless victims firing at your unmanned aerial vehicle. Now you can finally prepare yourself for a future of warfare that is presently happening in the world today. But if you want your high-flying explosive helicopter experience to have the higher stakes of mortality, then Cleared Hot is ready to get you KIA. In a tribute to the classic Desert Strike series of ancient history, this isometric action adventure will have you guiding a helicopter across the land, laying waste to anything on the ground within your rectangular perspective. And while you start out at the helm of a cool-ass Apache, you soon come to realize that this is just a flashback of your dishonorable discharge. In the present, you'll spend your time taking flight in a little baby helicopter that only receives some armament once you've learned to pick up your enemies with a hook and slingshot them into the mountains. But even after you obtain some real weapons for your minicopter, you'll still have the power to use that hook for all sorts of things, even grabbing missiles out of the sky and, with a small to medium miracle, tossing them back at the enemy. However, it's now time for me to toss you back to the rest of your free time because that's all the demos I could manage to squeeze into this video. There was no shortage of high quality and surprising games included in this Steam Next Fest, and I could have easily made this video twice as long with all the fun demos I played. But I figured since it's been over for a week, I should share this bountiful harvest with the masses and allow them to try some of those demos before they're potentially taken down. But don't let that stop you from pretending you played all of them and telling everyone how much you like them because you saw a 30-second clip of it in this video. And if you'd like to see more Steam Next Fest coverage or any number of hot takes, warm satire, and tepid commentary like this video, join the Patreon with people like Mega supporter Adam Wutke and check out more Abbreviated Reviews.